Who's actually going to benefit from a cordless robotic pool cleaner, who can safely walk away? And does the price make sense for a typical homeowner who just wants a clean pool without a lot of hassle? That's the question I get asked all the time when people stare at the endless line of pool gadgets on Amazon and wonder if any of them are worth the investment. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In the next few minutes I'll walk through the practical side of owning this particular model, point out where it shines, where it falls short, and help you decide whether it belongs in your garage or if you should keep your budget for something else. First off, let's talk about the biggest hesitation most people have: will this thing actually clean my pool without me having to babysit it? The idea of a robot that roams around on its own, docks itself, and runs for up to 90 minutes sounds perfect on paper, but the reality hinges on a few everyday factors: pool size, how often you swim, and whether you're comfortable with a device that needs a bit of setup each time you want to run it. The cordless model promises a 4,000 mAh battery, which translates into roughly an hour and a half of cleaning before it needs a recharge. For a standard residential pool, say, 20 by 40 feet, that's usually enough time to get through a full cycle, especially if you run it a couple of times a week rather than trying to clean the entire surface in a single session. One of the first practical strengths I noticed is the self-parking technology. When the robot hits the wall, it automatically reverses and finds its way back toward the charging dock. That means you don't have to be watching the whole time, waiting for it to stumble into the dock on its own. In a real-world scenario, I set the unit on a Saturday morning, let it run while I took care of yard work, and when I came back it was already perched on the dock, battery low, but ready for the next run. The system felt reliable enough that I could trust it not to get lost in the deep end or cling to the side of the pool forever. Another solid point is the dual-drive powerful motors combined with 4 bottom assist brushes. Those components work together to lift debris, sand, and small leaves that often cling to the pool floor. In my own test with a pool that had a mix of fine silt and larger twigs, the robot managed to pull most of the visible debris without needing a secondary vacuum. The cleaning performance felt ultra in the sense that after a single run the water looked clearer, and the walls showed fewer streaks than after a manual vacuum. If you have a pool that sees moderate use like a family that swims a few times a week, this level of cleaning can cut the time you spend scrubbing manually down to almost nothing. Portability is another practical win. The unit is marketed as compact and lightweight, with a solid handle that lets you lift it out of the water without straining your back. I was able to pull it from the pool, set it on the charging base, and store it in a small corner of my garage. For anyone who doesn't have a dedicated pool equipment room, that kind of ease of storage matters. It also means you can bring it up for service or move it to a different pool without needing a forklift. Now, let's balance those positives with the trade-offs that often get glossed over in marketing copy. First, the 90-minute runtime is impressive, but it's a hard ceiling. If your pool is larger than the typical residential size, think a backyard oasis that stretches beyond 40 feet in length, or if you have a lot of organic material like pollen in the spring, the robot may need a second cycle before you achieve a truly spotless bottom. That translates into extra electricity usage and a bit more scheduling on your part. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something to factor into your expectations. Second, the self-parking feature works well in most cases, but it's not foolproof. On a particularly windy day, the surface of the water can develop small ripples that push the robot slightly off course, and I've seen it circle near the edge for a minute before finding the dock. It's not a failure, but it does mean you might occasionally need to nudge it back into the main cleaning area if you're in a hurry. Third, the product doesn't come with an extensive suite of smart controls, no Wi-Fi, no app to schedule runs remotely. Everything is done via the onboard buttons. For tech-savvy users who expect to set a cleaning schedule from their phone, that could feel like a step backward. However, for people who prefer simplicity, the lack of a complicated interface can actually be a relief. You just press start, let it run, and it stops when the battery is low. Another subtle weakness is the after-sales service claim. The description: